If you make yourself more than just a man, if you devote yourself to an ideal, and if they can't stop you, then you become something else entirely.
Which is?
A legend, Mr. Wayne.
To them, you're just a freak. Like me. They need you right now. But when they don't, they'll cast you out. Like a leper.
All right, welcome to episode 3 of the Playlist Podcast. We're back here again to discuss The Dark Knight Rises, this tiny little movie that nobody really seems to care about that's out right now. So with me on the line are our managing editor, Kevin Jagernath. Thanks for being here, Kevin.
Hello.
And our fearless leader, Rodrigo Perez. Thanks for being here, Rod.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm your host, Eric McClanahan. And let's just get right into it. Obviously, this is the movie that everybody's been waiting for, me included, and I imagine you guys are on the same page. I've just been dying to see how Christopher Nolan was going to end this trilogy, especially just the way The Dark Knight ended. It was such a strong effort, and it's all come to this. And I just want to know kind of broad thoughts, starting with Kevin. What did you think of the movie?
I loved it, and what really struck me about the film was, superhero films in general, you go to the second or third one, and it's really all about adding another villain. The way the worlds expand are generally fairly predictable, and it really it's just more of the same we've seen before. But I think what Nolan does with Rises, which I think is hugely impressive, is that everything in terms of the psychology of the character, the scope of the world it takes place in, the themes of the film, the themes that have been carried through the series are just expanded upon in such a way that, for me, it really is the best of the Batman films that he's done, or even in Warner Brothers history, and it's just a knockout of the park. I mean, I think he nailed it. He delivered on the huge expectations the film had, and created something I think is going to be very, very difficult to top down the line.
So it's safe to say you'd agree with Todd's review on the site, his A-grade review.
Easily, yeah. I think definitely.
Okay, cool. Rod, let's go to you. What do you think?
I'm pretty much with Kevin. I think, and I love his point about more superhero films are generally like, who's the new villain? So Kevin, I think spot on there. And this one, there's an arc for this. The three films are thematically tied together. There's an arc for Gotham from Batman Begins all the way down. You know what I mean? There's an arc for the city. There's an arc for almost every single character that's been around from the beginning, and or characters who were like introduced in the second film still have an arc in the second one. And I just think it's a really, I know Nolan said it himself that it's a very it's meant to be a complete sort of beginning, middle, end, and it definitely is. Like, it ties in really, really well thematically to Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises, and there's several. I feel in many ways it's a film about the consequences from both of those films as well, that manifest in this one. So yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty superb. I think it's in some cases utterly spectacular. I hate to sound hyperbolic, but I think thematically it does, for me, it goes a super long way, like just how resonating some of those themes are.
I think it's good, not great. And I'm curious as to what you guys, before I really delve into why that is what did you guys think it's better than, you both think it's better than The Dark Knight then? Am I safe?
Easily. I think it's leagues, like, I think it dwarfs the two previous films by a considerable degree.
Really?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's just so much richer on every level. I mean, it makes the other two seem almost like practice runs, or they're just, I don't know. This one, I think, blows those two out of the water.
I think it's hard to say, but I think because, yeah, I think it's probably the best of the three, and maybe slightly better than The Dark Knight. I think The Dark Knight, for me personally, I have a lot of issues with that film when Harvey Dent, who's an super important character, but when he becomes Two-Face, my suspension of disbelief issues start to, get fairly close to breaking. But then again, I've had I've seen that movie more than once, and I've had time to sit with it and realize the things that I don't like about it. So there's that, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest issue I have with it, I've seen it twice now, The Dark Knight Rises, and it seems like a lot of people find the finale thrilling, and that's kind of where I think Nolan falters a little bit. I actually
interesting.
Yeah, and we'll have to get into it when we do delve into spoilers, but I feel like there was some punches pulled at the end, specifically one moment at the end that I just thought, like that didn't feel right to what he was building towards. And the sort of happy ending given to something that I just never thought could possibly lead to that much of a happy ending. It just is kind of it messed with my appreciation of the film. And I think it's weird. Can a movie be a great piece of a trilogy and like a really great conclusion to it, but as a singular, like just as the movie itself, I think it doesn't quite work as well as The Dark Knight. I don't know. There was something, and part of me is thinking that The Dark Knight had the nice. Usually, the second chapter in a trilogy is often the best film. You know, Godfather 2, Empire Strikes Back. You know, Spider-Man 2. Most would agree is the better of those three. And I don't know if because this had to conclude and wrap up so much that maybe it faltered a little bit with that for me. And I just, some of the way things were wrapped up at the end just really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I got to admit.
Before we dive maybe into the end, I know like the sort of the main criticism that I've seen online is that it's muddled, and I guess I haven't really read specific when people mean about that, so it's hard to discuss. But I see that talk like that it's too long, that it's muddled, and for one, I don't know. I also think that it's a film that if you're engaged in from minute one, you're engaged in it. Like I didn't notice that it was almost 3 hours because I was very engaged from minute one.
Agreed.
So length wasn't a problem for me. In terms of it being muddled, I'm not. I guess I don't understand. I'm open to understanding that criticism. I just don't necessarily see it, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are. And I'm, you know what I mean? Like if there's a certain example, I'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. But I don't know. I don't see it maybe right away.
The Dark Knight itself, the second film, is kind of a muddled story as well. Like there's issues that happen, like plot things that happens, like Gordon faking his death in the second film. Seeing that more and more, the more I watch that movie, I kind of question as to, and I think Oliver Littleton has brought it up in some pieces.
Right.
And I have to agree, like that doesn't work as well in that film, but there's something about The Dark Knight has a specific energy to it that just works for me better than The Dark Knight Rises did, and it just comes more down to that. I actually feel like The Dark Knight Rises is a little more clearly structured than The Dark Knight, and there isn't some of those laps in editing that seems to happen in the second film as much.
For me, I think the major difference between The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises is, for me, I felt that the stakes in this film were... I think this is the least cartoony. Not that Nolan's films are cartoony, but the least cartoony of the trilogy, and I think for that reason, it's a superior film. The Joker. Some people like to watch the world burn, and that's the Joker. I mean, but Bane is the guy who lights the match, and to me, that makes him even more fearsome than the Joker, who's just kind of he's an entertaining villain, but for me, Bane was just a much deeper villain on a number of levels. Not to mention his connection with Bruce Wayne also adds another nice element to that. Mm. And just overall, I felt that the peril that the people of Gotham were in was just so much more profound and resonated much more than The Dark Knight for me.
The peril, though, for Gotham was for me, not felt with the citizens of Gotham, because we get no time with the citizens in this film. But if you go back in The Dark Knight, there's that, you know, the final act with the citizens on the boat, you know, like there's that.
I always found that setup kind of goofy, to be totally honest.
Just the whole like mechanics of how it all works.
Just like it just seemed sort of ridiculously elaborate. Like I'm gonna have some boats and prisoners on each one and this and that.
Okay, but think about how elaborate Bane's plans are. I mean, Bane's are even more elaborate, but maybe
they really are.
Yeah, I mean they're extreme. I mean, I understand like how it could feel sort of odd, especially right before that scene at the end of The Dark Knight is Heath, you know, the Joker's saying how he's a mad dog and he just kind of does things, but clearly that's not true. Like he's planned out quite a bit what he executes in that movie.
Yeah.
And Bane as well, but I don't know. It's I actually feel like this is the most cartoonish of the three, or
interesting,
because Nolan really goes far with like the, you know, we can say we should have said earlier that we're gonna delve into spoilers, so I think we're gonna say right now
spoilers don't listen
if you haven't seen only listen to this if you've seen the film. Bane does the thing that we all speculated was going to happen. He breaks Batman's back in this film. But doesn't that... did you guys actually feel that pain? Or, like, I mean, like, feel that it was kind of easily fixed in the film itself. I felt like...
That's the thing. I don't know if he necessarily, quote unquote, breaks his back. But, you know, in the movie or in the comics, he breaks his back, and I think I can't remember, but I think he's out of commission for several months, and I guess he's kind of out of commission for several months here. But you know, like when you break your back, it's like when you really do it, you're out for a year or longer. And sometimes you just you're not going to walk again.
Yeah, right.
This is clearly not necessarily the same situation, but. And I don't know. I think the stakes were. I think that felt very believable, and I don't know. Back to the Joker Bane thing. I almost don't want to get sidetracked with that, but I think the Joker is a superior villain, but I don't think it doesn't. I don't know if that necessarily matters for this film. Anyhow.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too sidetracked with it either, because I actually really liked Bane, and I think Tom Hardy had a really, really difficult role to pull off if you think about it. I mean, the guy he's a great actor, and he has a really expressive face, and he's masked the entire time. And I also just really dug what he did with his voice. The sort of like Bond era Sean Connery inflection he gave it really, really worked for me.
I think Bane, whereas the Joker is so rich because he's a pathological liar for one. I mean, like you said, you know, he's an anarchist, but no, he's not. He's actually got everything so thoroughly planned out. He's basically lying throughout the entire film. He's contradicting himself all the time. He's amusing. He's fun. He's kind of in love with Batman. He basically thinks I don't exist. Like we essentially can't exist in a universe without each other. You know what I mean? You complete me.
There's no going back. You've changed things forever.
Then why do you want to kill me?
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No. You complete me.
You're garbage. Who kills for money?
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be.
There's so much rich stuff in the Joker that I think makes him a superior villain. But that doesn't matter necessarily. Bane is a completely different villain, and I don't necessarily want to even like kind of rank them. But Bane is just so like terror personified, you know. I just thought he was like his whole plan, the whole reckoning is terrifying. Those shots when Gotham blows up and the bridges go and everything, it's chilling to anybody like who witnessed 9/11, man. I think that's like very real, very and chilling and just terrifying.
Yeah, I think Nolan does a good job, again, wrapping around sort of real-world post 9/11 parables within these films. He is very good at that, I think, and he's still. And I agree with the fact that I had no problem with the pacing in this. I mean, he just continues to prove that he's a master of pacing his films, because what's the running time on this thing? 2 hours, 45 minutes?
I think everybody would disagree with you on that. But,
yeah.
I mean, that's the criticism that I see everywhere, is that it's way too long.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel it.
No, not at all. And even though I have issues with the film, like I said, I still think it's good, and I think it's a really great capper to the trilogy. But yet, and I have no issues with the pacing. That movie flies along.
The thing is, I kind of feel like if I watch that movie again and I have the benefit of seeing it twice and analyzing it a little bit closer, I'm probably going to see its flaws a little bit longer. And I think The Dark Knight kind of flew by the first time I saw it, and now when I see it, it kind of drags. So I think that might be the same for this, but and who knows, I could see tons of flaws in it, but I always appreciate a film that I feel is so powerful and so engaging that if there is flaws like that, that I just don't even notice them and they go by. I think that I think that's powerful filmmaking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these science fiction genre films, like
Prometheus.
Yeah, sure. or even like how Ryan Johnson, who's directing Looper, that's coming up, he said specifically, like, if you pay attention, like, there's a lot of things that don't like logically work, but in these movies it doesn't matter because they go by so quickly and they're so thrilling that it doesn't matter. But if you sit there and analyze and pick apart time travel, for example, you're going to go, oh, well, this is where in this moment where it falls apart. But I don't know. That's a little bit boring to me when you get to that point where you're really starting. Like, if you either feel it and you're like, or you don't. But I think trying to like pick it apart for whatever reason, just gets a little bit.
Well, I mean, if you're watching a science fiction film for the realism, then you're not really watching. You know what I mean? It kind of doesn't make sense. I think you can forgive a film its flaws if it works on a much larger level. And I think whatever flaws The Dark Knight Rises has, which we'll probably, as you were saying, see down the line or maybe see in a second or third viewing, I agree. I mean, the fact that it works as well as it does, as entertainingly as it does, as on all the other levels as it does the first time out, I think is a positive thing.
But isn't Nolan sort of bringing on that sort of detailed, like picking things apart because he wants this to be set in as realistic a world as possible? I mean, is that not? Do you guys think that he brings that out of the audience even more so because he wants this to be as realistic as possible?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think fanboys particularly will pick anything apart, whether it's supposed to be grounded or not.
That's a good point.
And the other thing is that so much of these things it's just really subjective. It's like, Harry Knowles, I think.
Oh my God.
Right. I think he detests this film. I don't want to get into like,
I know,
Harry, but I think he detests this film because he feels like, for example, that it's not Batman. It's not the Batman that he has seen in the comics.
Right.
So, whereas I don't care. I mean, I just care that it's a good movie and it's Nolan's Batman. I feel like it's exactly it's a through line with all the other three films. So it's very much. But his complaint, for example, is that it's not in the spirit of Batman, whatever that means. But so it's like kind of subjective. Like some people, for example, I know some people go like, how did Bruce Wayne get across the ice? How did that happen? And like the movie kind of stopped for them. And I'm like, really? Like, I mean, I kind of thought that later too, but it doesn't stop the movie for me. And something like that's not something where I go, oh, you're right. This it's broken. The logic broke down there, and therefore, you know what I mean? I don't operate that way, but maybe some people do, and I guess that's fair enough. But I just find that sometimes that does happen where, and I suppose in our good, bad, and the ugly piece that's coming tomorrow as well, there's going to be some of that as well, just because that's what we do. But
I don't know. I think at this point we know that Bruce Wayne and Batman, he's pretty resourceful. I never had a problem with him making it back to Gotham in any way. You just kind of have to accept that, right? At some point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we should move into like just plot details, plot spoilers, things like that we want to just delve into before we discuss where the franchise could head from here, because it's definitely more open-ended at the ending as far as where it could go than I expected it to be. So,
right, it's well, if we just go dive into the ending.
Yeah, sure.
It's, I guess, open-ended, but it's not. It's not. This is Nolan's final film, and it's not supposed to spawn another film. There's no. We all know that. Quote unquote Robin or John Blake or Robin John Blake is introduced in this film, but there's not going to be a Robin John Blake film with some other director. It's I think the more important part, and what I think is what makes the film so powerful, is that it really says Batman is immortal because he's a symbol, and the symbol's going to live on no matter what. That's the important part. People get tied up with, oh, Robin, and he's got the suit, and I think like how to me the the immortality thing, which I think is brilliant. Why Ra's al Ghul shows up? I mean, he doesn't show up. It's a hallucination of Batman's.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Wayne sees that, and then Ra's al Ghul tells him, like, I can't die because I'm immortal. Of course he can't, because he's like, it's almost like martyrdom. He's lived on, and that gives Bruce Wayne that idea. That's right. I can do the same thing. Batman can live on indefinitely, and his sacrifice, whether it's real or not, and it turns out it's not, is it's a huge thing. They make this statue, it's like Batman will, and he's not a superhero. It's forever known from that point on. And the great thing is Robin doesn't have to even be introduced. That sacrifice is so important. It's like here's a person who was human and was extraordinary and pushed themselves to the limit psychologically, physically, emotionally, and became this superhuman person because of his will. And it's like, you could do this too. I think it's just so rich and so powerful, that symbology, that I find that ending, I find it moving. Regardless of whether Robin's there, regardless of whether he lives on, I think it's just so powerful and resonant.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and am I getting too hung up on the fact that my big issue is that that shot where Alfred looks over at the table and sees Bruce with Selina Kyle at the end? I am I getting too hung up on that then? Maybe I am, because everything you're saying is true. Like, that's the idea of Batman. Like, that symbol lives on, and that ties in really nicely. And I never got the sense that Nolan, obviously, he's done with these films, but you don't think there's any way that was a franchise builder for a new franchise?
Absolutely not. Not in any kind of way.
I totally agree. I don't think it's that closing shot is a resolution to the Christian Bale Bruce Wayne story. I mean, that his story is done. He's hung up the cowl, he's hung up the cape. Mm-hmm. As Rodrigo said, the thing with Robin is not to spawn a new franchise. I mean, whether they do or not, who knows? But I mean, what Nolan is doing here is, as he explained, it's a symbol. It's a huge symbol. And the other part of that equation is that now the orphanage is located in the Wayne Manor,
right?
And so essentially, you have another generation after Robin to continue, because some kids, it's just, it all ties into what he was saying, the theme of the immortality of this thing living on.
And a whole generation to be inspired. You know what I mean? That's what Batman did. That's and what's what I love about Michael Caine's character. He's always telling him, like, you have to, and it's something that Bruce Wayne says early on to Michael Caine in Batman Begins. It's not about beating bad guys up. It's about being a symbol. It's about being something that will last and will endure. And then he takes it to another level. It will last. It will endure, because he made the ultimate sacrifice for the city, even though he didn't. The rest of the city thinks that. That's all that matters. Mm-hmm. And that symbol will inspire and endure for generations on and on again. And maybe it gets picked up and inspired by John Blake, who his whole role in the film is to symbolize idealism. So mm-hmm. I think it's very apropos. It's really great and powerful. And then the whole the very scene at the end where they reveal he's alive, I think also is very in keeping and apropos with Bruce Wayne's arc and the story that goes on between Michael Caine and Bruce Wayne throughout the entire series. Throughout the entire series, they are essentially arguing the entire time. They're both very aware of what he's doing. Yes, you're a symbol. You're trying to do this, but when does this end? When you can't do this forever. This has to be like a kind of short-term thing. And I can't remember which film it's in. Maybe Batman Begins or Dark Knight. But there's a line where Bruce Wayne says, like, what would you have me do, Alfred? And he says, endure.
Yeah, it's Dark
And I
Knight,
feel
yeah.
like that's the line, man. Endure. That's the line where like he sees him at the end, and it's like, yes, that's and they they argue about that at the beginning of. They're like, that they're essentially like he's saying, you're too old for this. You cannot do this any longer. This is the end of the road here. So you need to figure out a game plan going forward. Otherwise, you are going to die. And so you know what? When he's arguing with Alfred throughout the whole film, his game plan is building in his mind, and he has an end game, and he does it. So I think it's very appropriate and, again, powerful, resonant, impactful.
Damn, you guys are putting me to shame here. I'm really starting to think I think I just got too hung up on and thinking like, oh, Nolan was like essentially building it towards for someone else to pick up this franchise. And
I think it's thematically and emotionally fulfilling, and that's why it works.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm having trouble disagreeing right now, but it was something about the fact that I was like, Batman has to die at the end of this film. It just like was built up in my mind, and the fact that it didn't, it felt like he was pulling a punch.
I mean, this film in particular is all about how, symbols and legends can be manipulated, whether for good or for evil. Bane doesn't care about, occupying Gotham and rectifying the differences.
Yeah, that's just
between the rich
one
and the
big
poor.
fucking ruse.
Yeah,
It's a total ruse. He's taking that movement, and co-opting it for his own ends. And the whole film is really about Bruce Wayne trying to find a way to, escape his own death while still being able to leave Gotham in hope. And finally, at the end, he figures out how to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But then
Absolutely.
his journey is all about how to avoid essentially martyring himself.
Yeah.
Did
Because
you guys-
that's absolutely correct. Because that's what Alfred's essentially saying. Is that what you're going to do? Are you going to martyr yourself? Is that what this is all worth? And Bruce never really answers him, but and sort of suggesting like, well, maybe it is worth. I don't know. I have to stop this evil. It's what I have to do. And in somewhere along that line, when he's fighting it, he finds out that he understands the plan. And like Kevin says, like. Bane's thing is also like one gigantic symbol. He's not there to like the Occupy Wall Street theme of the have and the have-nots is interesting in the film. It ties in amazingly well to the arc of Gotham City. Gotham City's arc is awesome. That film, the trilogy starts with Batman Begins. If you remember, that city is in like completely corrupt. Like the police are like, Gordon's the only Gordon's the idealist in that film. He's the only like true cop. The whole city's in huge poverty. There's the Narrows. There's all that, that sort of like low end society there. And, and then it gets cleaned up over time. And then it gets cleaned up to the final film where, there's been no crime essentially, but it's all built upon a lie. And I thought that was really powerful too. This whole city's cleaned up, but it's kind of not. And Gordon knows that. And it's like he's got this like shame within him. And I think that's just a really rich and textured theme as well. But so sorry, back to the point of Bane. His whole thing is to create a symbol of one, destroying Batman in front of the world in the city, and then crushing the city itself as a symbol of like, look what we can do, and you will never forget this,
Well, to crush Batman, Bruce Wayne's spirit as well.
Sure.
I mean, crush him physically, crush him spiritually at the same time.
Right, and then just show to the world like, you will, the plan is essentially, think about it. They're going to nuke everything. It's not about it. There's a big ruse of like, these people have been underprivileged, and we're going to like take the fat cats and we're going to hand the city back. But that's not what it is. That's the ruse on the surface. What it is essentially to blow up Gotham and show the world this is a lasting legacy of the League of Shadows. This will be remembered for ages upon ages of something that they did. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's supposed to be like, in that sense, it's very similar to what the terrorists tried to do in 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if you look at the themes of the film, and I think people want to look at this film politically, and there's probably a lot to talk about, but I think what Christopher Nolan really addresses here is that there's no pure movement. There is no pure sort of, the Harvey Dent Act was built on a lie and was co-opted so the cops can have power to put people in jail.
The Harvey Dent Act also is kind of echoes the Patriot Act. It's pretty interesting.
Exactly.
Oh, definitely.
Exactly. And even at the end of the film, Batman's quote unquote death in the eyes of Gotham is also a lie, but it's a lie to deliver the greater good. And and Bane's, and again with Bane, he's co-opting it, but for something that's bad. So I think there's a lot to be talked about here in terms of ideals being twisted and turned by whoever's pulling the strings at the top of the chain. And I don't know. I just think for me that adds a huge amount of texture to the film.
Yeah, that's a lot of
elements.
Rich psychological, emotional, sociological texture that I don't know how far that goes for certain people, but I think for me it's what makes the film kind of epic. The legend ends. It's true, but what the poster, but it also endures and it goes on. And I just feel the way that I feel like the end is a three-way punch. The faux sacrifice, which you think is a sacrifice in the moment, then the manifestation of idealism through Robin, and then Batman enduring. I think that is like probably one of the most epic endings I've ever seen. That I felt like I was wowed. My jaw was on the floor. I was like, I cannot believe that they did that.
Yeah, I would agree.
I really like how in this film in particular too, they got back to Bruce Wayne and Batman. The Dark Knight, even more than the other two films, I feel like is more of this one's a big ensemble piece as well, but they really focus in on Bruce Wayne a lot in this film, to the point where Batman is not in this film all that much, like as his character as Batman. And I thought that was a really interesting tactic, and where I had to be amused when I read Harry Knowles' review, you cited it earlier, Rod, is just he could not get over the fact that this was not the Batman that he wanted it to be from the comics or whatever he had built it up to be. But what I've loved about all three of these films is that Nolan has made this he's usurped those elements of the comics and the legend that Batman has been for so long, and done it in a way that he's interested in exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why. Yeah, and I think those three films are very cohesive, and they're very much Nolan's Batman trilogy, and they're very much in the spirit of that. So yeah, I guess it's unfortunate for Harry that it wasn't that, but
there was a lot of
too bad for him, I guess.
A lot of anger in that review. I didn't know.
But I think it marks a difference between. For me, what makes the Batman films, sort of at the premiere of the comic book movies right now, is because when Batman decides to go into action, there's a whole there are real hard reasons why or why not he shouldn't be doing it, and so it just makes it a much more interesting thing than Iron Man just flying around and doing his thing. I mean, that's entertaining. That's a different kind of a film.
Right.
But for me, it's a greater pleasure when there's a real motivation, when there's real emotional stakes involved with putting on that mask and going out. Like for me in the film, when Batman does return to action for the first time in 8 years, it's a little bit moving because it's, he's finally coming out of his shell a bit. He realizes he does need to return, and it's a pretty big moment. It's not just him returning to action. There's a whole host of underlying emotions there that are really deep and interesting.
Absolutely, and you touched upon something which is really great, because when he eventually faces off Bane, there's a lot of fear there, man. I think that fight scene between them is one of the best fight scenes I've ever seen on screen, simply because I feel like it could have been a scene of dialogue. I feel like there's a dance going on and there's a conversation going on between them in their fight. I think it's incredible that there's Bane's basically saying, like, in a chilling, confident way, and I get my hands on you, I'm gonna crush you. You're done. And it's so like it's in there in the physicality of his fighting. His fighting is so confident. The psychology of that fight. And Batman's essentially saying in that conversation, whatever, buddy, I'm actually, you think you're tough, but I'm going to take you out. But he's actually kind of terrified in that. And it's sort of shown in that fight too. His fight is sort of saying that. The way he's fighting is essentially, it's a big game of him putting on airs, but he's kind of terrified inside because he's getting his, once that fight begins, he quickly realizes he's outmatched.
Yeah, I think he goes into that battle with a bit of arrogance. And it quickly turns into, holy shit, I'm going to get my ass kicked.
Right.
Yeah, there was something, the first time I saw the film is that there's something so matter of fact about the way that scene is staged, and when the big, when the big moment comes where, Bane crushes his back over his knee, it happens so quickly, and it kind of bothered me that there wasn't almost like more significance put on that. But actually, I think that's kind of what's brilliant about it, is that it's just like it happens like it would happen. Boom, he's done, walks away, Bane's on to his next move, and that scene it a second time is like, fuck, that was a really powerful moment to do it in that matter-of-fact way.
Right, and it's like stage one of like, he essentially crushes Batman, literally, and he's crushed him, and then he throws him in a pit, and then he leaves him to die, so his spirit is crushed.
Yeah.
And, that was the whole plan all along.
And pretty cool to do it early in the film, because I think a lot of us expected if that was going to happen in this movie, it would be near the end, and that would be the end of Batman. But
yeah, and that's a problem, I think, for some people, that like, that happens to him, and Batman's gone for a good chunk of the movie. There's like he's not there, and it's a Bruce Wayne sort of story. But I think, like Kevin said, it's like that to me, it doesn't matter. I don't necessarily care whether Batman is around, because he is around, because he's Bruce Wayne. He's not just people want to see him doing stuff, but that doesn't interest me personally. I'm more interested in the textured emotional and psychological stuff in it, which I think this film is just steeped in.
Yeah. What do you guys think about the reveal of Marion Tate, played by Marion Cotillard, or is there what's her name? What Tate?
Miranda Tate.
Yeah.
She's
she turns out Talia al Ghul.
Talia al Ghul, yeah. The reveal is that's one of the things that actually got spoiled a long time ago. It's one of the first things that got spoiled, so everybody knew it. Yep. At the same time, when it came up, I had in the back of my mind that I knew that this was going to happen, but even when it does, it still kind of like took me by surprise, because I was so like in this moment of like, wow, Batman's taking out Bane here, and I was like so engaged in it that when she comes up from behind, it's like it's a huge surprise,
Yeah, and I wonder though, what does it change? Like, are her and Bane then? Are we to assume that they've been working in tandem, or is Bane simply just her sidekick? I mean, because it kind of they
have been working in tandem, and I think there's something which isn't quite fully realized, and I think there's supposed to be some kind of like love story between them, not necessarily a love story, but he because he's a lot older than her, right? Because she was a child when he was in Thing, but I think like he's just devoted to her in a way that maybe doesn't border. It's not romantic love, but it's like
I took it as more of a strong sort of sibling style relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Older brother looking out for younger sister kind of a thing.
Well, they had to have been in cahoots, and because this has essentially been a decade-long plan.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been 8 years. And in fact, if you look at the beginning of The Dark Knight Rises, when Commissioner Gordon, Gary Oldman's doing his speech, and this is supposed to be at Gotham at its most calmest, the guy says like, that he's going to get let go next season because that was wartime. This is peacetime.
Yeah.
When he's giving that speech in Gotham, like, all the fat cats of Gotham are there, listening to that speech. There's members of the League of Shadows throughout.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're like planted there, like guys that you see throughout to sort of indicate to you this has been a long tail game. This has been a decade-long game, like long tail game of getting their claws into the city, becoming people, and then overtaking it. So it's been he's been gone for 8 years. It's almost a decade long, like kind of sort of long term, like almost like Black Ops like plan. Which is kind of really masterful in that sense too. You know what I mean? These people are serious and they take their time.
It does actually help a lot more with the plausibility of the fact that, given all the damage they cause on Gotham, it actually makes it much more believable. They have been doing this for a long time.
Sure. They've been planning, and they have been doing, like, those tunnels are essentially built by the time The Dark Knight Rises started. They weren't built in 2 months. They've been doing them in secret for the tunnels were over there, but they were always building their army or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I actually thought it was really nice, on a total random point, that another connecting element in this, or character that's been in all 3 films, is they brought back the Scarecrow again in a really nice, almost akin to that beautiful image from The Dark Knight where the Joker lights that monstrous pile of cash on fire, was almost as great a powerful an image was the desks of all the, where they had piled up and made his sort of judges stand. I thought that was a really great touch. And just adds more texture to the whole series as a whole. Like, these villains don't just come and go per film. Like, a lot of them, people are there, and like they add to the richness of the world. That's a really effective element to it.
I think so too. I think that's it's some people go like, oh, here, include this villain here. It's like a cameo, but it's not. It's like it's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
It's like it's and probably, I mean, it was off the table completely, but had Heath Ledger been alive, maybe he would have been shown at some point.
I was going to say, do you guys think it's weird that they never even mention Joker, or does it work better to the idea of Joker's character as sort of this like elusive thing we never really know anything about, and he just was there for one chapter and gone?
I think it makes more sense that he's not there. I mean, the Joker essentially worked for himself.
Yeah.
Whereas you can see the Scarecrow sort of colluding with whoever is stronger than he is, because as a villain, he's a pretty weak villain. He would recognize when someone's stronger than he is. And he's a smart guy, and just sort of caught into that and get involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That's said in the first one. He's a pawn of Ra's al Ghul in the first one.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not that big of a player. He was always a little bit small time.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he can take it. Because he's not a hero. He's a silent guardian. A watchful protector. A dark knight.
What happens with Batman now? I think you guys have said you don't think they're going to build off the Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Robin taking on the Batman mantle.
No.
So let's just assume that that's not going to happen. Where does it go from here? Does it start with the Justice League, like we've talked about in the last podcast, or do they have to? I mean, what happens with Batman now? I mean, what do we know that's happening?
Yeah, that gets pretty complicated in the sense that because their Justice League thing, which more and more I think about this film, and I think it's so dumb. And to go back tangentially, someone on Twitter, I think it was someone at Marvel, was like, I saw The Dark Knight, and they were joking, but they were like, I saw The Dark Knight Rises, and it was fun, but had the Avengers been there, this movie would have been finished in 2 minutes. And I was like, and that's why The Dark Knight Rises is better.
Yeah, right.
Because because these characters are just like, they're superhuman, and they're this other fantasy thing, and they're great and it's fun. I think The Avengers was such a great film, but this is a film about a human who's using technology and his resources to push himself to the limits to be superhuman, but he's not. At the end of the day, he's a human being. So anyhow, that's my little tangent there.
Yeah.
But I think going forward is pretty difficult because what do you do? Do you do another film, and does that bleed into Justice League? Do you follow the Marvel sort of MO? Do you do a Justice League film and then spin off the Batman, or do you do like what Superman's going to probably happen? Superman is going to be, although what do they not have confidence for a trilogy? But like that's supposed to be a standalone film, and then Justice League is supposed to be another superhero film that will have a different Superman. Like Henry Cavill won't be in that. How they do that, I guess I just wish them luck. I don't know.
Do you think they're planting? I mean, maybe this is just a total wild speculation, but what if way down the road, the new Superman movie that's coming out, it could be part of the seeds that are being planted for a take on Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, where maybe Christian Bale as Batman comes back way down the road and he's older,
I'm sure they're not thinking about that.
Yeah, I think I'd be giving Warner Brothers no, I don't think they've planned out that far ahead, which is, it's probably a different discussion for a different day, but their whole relationship, their whole utilization of the DC Comics thing just has not gone, it was discussed in another podcast, but it just has not gone well and not the way they had planned. So they're in a really interesting position. I personally think it would be naive to think they're not having discussions about trying to get a Robin movie or trying to utilize that because it's a big part of that ending.
Yeah.
And I think, as much as Warner Brothers wants to honor the integrity of Christopher Nolan's vision and this and that, they also need to make some cash. They also want to exploit this for
Yeah, but you know
the
what?
fan.
They can spin off this movie and make a Robin film going forward, or they can do a whole other Batman trilogy, and a Batman trilogy is going to do more money than a spin-off
Yeah,
Batman
no,
film
for sure,
or
for
a
sure. And
spin-off Robin
yeah,
film. So
yeah, that's
if
true.
if they're looking at this as a financial thing only, they just need to do
I'm
another
just saying,
trilogy and start over again.
right? I mean, my main point is that I'm just saying I would not be surprised if they're going to spend the next week or the next month, kicking ideas around, because why not? It doesn't hurt to at least table the idea, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are. But in terms of the actual Batman franchise, for the next filmmaker, they're gonna have.
Oof.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, but good
I
luck,
really
right?
wish them.
Like,
I mean, they would have.
Who's going to try and top that? That's going to be.
I mean, what I would hope they would do is not do another origin story, because it's been done twice now. Burton did it. Nolan did it.
Burton never really did the origin story. I mean,
It's
yeah,
touched on. I mean, I'm
That's
just
true.
saying it's
That's
established.
true.
We
That's
don't need to. We don't need to see the murder of the parents and the whole thing
sure.
reestablished. I think it was in the early when Darren Aronofsky was kicking around his sort of wild steampunk version. Personally, I would love to see them just take it in that sort of crazy direction. I doubt they will, but
They're not going to do it. This is as let's face it. You're not going to get. I think where do you go from here if you're DC? Well, you've already done Dark and Real. You've done Christopher Nolan's thing. Aronofsky's would have been even more low tech and more. They're not going to go that way. They're going to go probably the opposite way.
Yeah.
But more high tech.
More cartoony.
Like
More-
Schumacher-esque.
More Marvel.
I wouldn't say Schumacher-esque, but more Marvel-esque. I think you would see. I think what's going to happen after Superman, which is a little bit unfortunate, because I think these, the Dark Knight series is just going to stand the test of time as this really kind of rich and epic and textured thing, but at the end of the day, you got an Avengers film that just is the second highest grossing film of all time. So that's what's getting people's attention. You know what I mean? So I think that's where DC is going to go with after post Man of Steel, because Man of Steel looks like it's very much in the vein of
It looks like
Batman
it was produced
series.
by Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, and you know what?
Yeah.
I'm already in, man. I'm loving it right now. I mean, I saw those trailers that are out there. I mean, obviously when it gets into the action stuff and Zack Snyder's doing an action Superman film, maybe that's where it falters. But tonally, right now, I'm in the tank for it. I'm like, this is exactly what I want to see. It seems like there's the exact kind of emotional issues at its core, that Batman has, that I find that elevates superhero films, because when you're just superhuman and you're not a human being, I can't really relate in that way,
Mm-hmm.
I have my serious reservations at this moment for Man of Steel, and I'll tell you why. The trailers are fine; they're great, even if the cynic in me thinks they look like insurance ads or jeans commercials.
Or like Terrence Malick, someone trying to be Terrence Malick.
I would still rather see an entire Zack Snyder trying to be Terrence Malick Superman film than the traditional thing of what like Watchmen, which
I guess I just
Yeah.
having seen Sucker Punch. I mean, after Sucker Punch and Watchmen, I just don't trust Snyder to have any idea of how to handle tone at all. Like as much as those trailers are a great minute and a half, can he sustain it for 2.5 hours without screwing the pooch at some point, or when it gets into the action just getting ridiculous? I don't know. I mean, I would love it if Snyder came out and just totally remade himself and redeemed himself really for a lot of things, but
Yeah.
I have reservations.
I think those are fair, and I mean, of course, Christopher Nolan has loosely been he's the producer on the film, but he's kind of kept himself disconnected from a lot of the creative choices with that, basically, to this point, right?
Yeah, but I think that's also him just being a gracious guy too.
Just being a
Yes,
good,
yes.
that's okay.
I think so too. I think from what I've seen and what I've read, and just even saw some new interviews recently with the producers of The Dark Knight Rises, who are also the producers of Superman. It seems like they've got a script that's very much in the similar tone, and from what I can tell, Snyder's almost looking at it as as a work for hire type of thing. Like, this is the tone of this thing. I have to be this kind of director for this. This is not me putting my stamp on this. This script is very, it is what it is, and it's, you know, it's similar in that way to Batman Begins, and it's. I mean, I just love some of the things in there that you already see. Like, it's a character that's full of fear and alienation, who's told by his father, "You are different from everybody else, and if everybody one day if finds that out, you're going to be in trouble." Like, that's a pretty powerful thing to be told at a young age. You know what I mean? And just some of those lines in there are just like rich stuff. I'm like, wow, this is good. This is like, so I'm not necessarily this is gonna be the greatest movie ever. I'm just saying I'm very I like where they're, yeah, exactly. I'm optimistic, and I like where they're going.
Cool.
Even the stuff that Jor-El's telling them is just like, there's some interesting stuff that we have not seen in a Superman film.
Definitely. Well, let's try to wrap this up with a little bit of a discussion on Christopher Nolan. Like, what happens to him at this point? Do we know anything as to what? I mean, because he's not doing his Howard Hughes movie. That's long. That's
yeah,
long
that's
done, right?
that's done.
He even got to touch on that a little bit, I guess, with The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Nolan, I mean, he's in a really great. He has a rare position that few directors have. He doesn't have a deal at a studio. He's free, and I mean, he obviously has a great relationship with Warner Brothers, and I'm sure they would be the first place he goes with anything he wants to do. But he's really in a great position, and almost kind of a scary position as well, because he can do whatever he wants now. He has really a blank page, and this is and you know, it's rare. It's rare that I have this feeling about directors, particularly for tentpoles. But the thing that really struck me with The Dark Knight Rises is that on a pure blockbuster spectacle level, I thought it was enthralling. Like, the IMAX, just how he stages, even just an establishing shot of going into a city in IMAX is just, you know, it raises goosebumps. It's great stuff. I personally would love to see him do another Inception-style original idea blockbuster, because I think there's so few directors right now who do that kind of thing. Original, smart, deep, textured blockbusters. You know, I want someone to give him $200 million and say, go play, and let's see what you do.
I think he seems like he's pretty set to be playing in the big sandbox. I mean, he's said he's always wanted to be a big commercial director, and he has his style that he can bring into that sort of world. And I'm with you. I hope he just, you know, can continue to do stuff like Inception now that he's done his franchise comic book. I'm excited to see where he goes from here. And, you know, who knows what... I have a feeling we're going to be hearing that probably pretty soon, what his next plan... I mean, it's always going to be asked, you know, by every journalist that'll get a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think he'll lay low for a bit.
Yeah, deservedly.
Maybe develop what he's doing. I mean, Lord knows he can afford to take his time.
Kevin, what's your favorite film of his? Like, if I may ask you to sort of rank, what do you really like out of Nolan's?
You know, it's hard to say. I'm too close to seeing Dark Knight Rises now, but
yeah,
I would probably say that and Inception are probably near the top. I have a really soft spot for The Prestige.
Yes.
I just think it's so clever and so smart. You know, yeah, probably those three would be at the top.
I still really, really love Memento. I got to be honest. And I just rewatched it recently. That movie holds up.
I haven't seen that in a long time. So that's one I definitely need to go back and revisit.
Just when you revisit it, the score in Memento is, you can see what he was interested in. Like, he was interested in the big kind of, like, you know, throbbing propulsive score right from the beginning.
Really?
You know? Oh man,
that's interesting.
And like he's said he has an affinity for like Michael Mann stuff. You know, like I've heard a lot of comparisons to The Dark Knight, where he kind of wanted it to be his version of Heat. You know, as a comic book movie.
Yeah.
And that's right there in Memento as well. Like, just the things he builds on with score and pacing and all that. It was there from early on, and Memento is really, really holds up. So
yeah, I like all those films. Memento, it's hard for me to pick a favorite. I think they're all great. I mean, he does these great things with these anti-heroes in Inception, Prestige, and Memento, and arguably even The Dark Knight. Yeah, I just assume he's probably going to be making more films like that, which more power to him. And great, you know, he loves playing with big toys, as you said. It's like, it's as if Kubrick wanted to be, you know, a tentpole director, but with like these, you know, great stories and characters and emotional arcs and stuff that's like a cut above than just rather like, you know, Daredevil or something, or like most superhero films we've seen, or whatever. His stuff's just so I assume he's just gonna keep doing that kind of stuff.
His films just have, I mean, especially with like just at these Batman films, it's the same thing this year that happened to me when The Dark Knight came out. Because when The Dark Knight came out in May, Iron Man had shown up and was a huge hit, and everybody was pretty crazy about it. And I was like, that movie was, you know, it was good fun. And then The Dark Knight came out, and I was like, well, shit, that just makes Iron Man look like kid stuff. And as much as I enjoyed the Avengers this year, I mean, and I have issues with elements of The Dark Knight Rises, most of which you guys have almost talked me out of completely. I just think The Dark Knight Rises makes the Avengers look like kid stuff, you know? And
yeah.
There's just
I'll say this. I think there's space for those kinds of movies, and I think they're work and they're really great, and they should continue being there. I just think that this makes the difference between, like, you know, legendary and all time and something that's just like a great piece of entertainment.
Yeah, I agree.
The one thing I didn't get to say, to me, maybe the most inspiring moment in the entire film, which I think is epic, is when he tells Gordon to light the fuse or the fire, and it makes that symbol, and the you know, the fire, the Batman symbols on the bridge, and the entire city sees it. That, to me, I was like, oh, I thought that was just.
One moment for me is that really, I thought was a really nice touch, was when he goes to the hospital and he goes to the doctor, and then he puts on the ski mask and goes down to visit Gordon. I just thought it was a nice nod to his sort of super low tech beginnings or whatever. Just sort of
the early days.
Yeah. I thought that was just a nice touch. Pretty clever.
I'm with you, and I gotta say, even though it's that very closing shot of Joseph Gordon-Levitt getting actually on the Batcave as it's rising out of the water and then close to black. Man, it's just a reminder of how fucking good Christopher Nolan is at closing his films. You know, he leaves you in that moment where you can forget about anything that maybe didn't work for you as you were watching the movie, and it's just like the guy knows how to orchestrate a film and end on a strong note.